Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest paradoxes in modern tech. It's the story of how the very company that invented the engine for all of modern AI somehow found itself in a desperate race to catch up to its own creation.
I mean, seriously, how does that even happen? How do you invent the future and then get left in the dust? Well, the answer is a wild story of brilliant innovation, crippling hesitation, and one heck of a multi-billion-dollar mistake. Let's get into it.
So, to really understand how Google fell behind, you first have to grasp just how far ahead they actually were. We've got to rewind the clock to the moment they literally changed the game.
Okay, picture this. It's 2017. A team at Google Brain publishes this research paper with a kind of quirky title. But inside this paper was the blueprint for the entire AI revolution. They called their invention the Transformer.
Now, the big idea here was, frankly, genius. See, before the Transformer, AI models had to read text kind of like we do, one word at a time, in order. But the Transformer? It could look at the entire sentence, or even a whole paragraph, all at the same time. This meant it could understand context and nuance in a way that was just impossible before.
And this wasn't just a small step up, it was a gigantic leap. The older models were slow, and worse, they'd often forget the beginning of a long paragraph by the time they got to the end. The Transformer, though, it was lightning fast, and it could connect an idea at the very end of a document to something mentioned on page 1. It completely changed everything.
So, Google has this incredible, world-changing technology in their hands. The stage is set, right? Well, not exactly. Because Google's invention wasn't going to be exploited by them first. Instead, it lit a fire under a small startup in San Francisco, which led to two very, very different game plans. And this is where the story splits. On one side, you have Google, the cautious giant. They were obsessed with academic research and absolutely terrified of releasing a flawed product that could tarnish their brand. And on the other side, you had OpenAI, the bold disruptor. They were all about getting a product out there, learning from real users, and fixing things as they went. So why was Google so cautious? This number. This number is why. That's how much money they made from advertising in 2021 alone. Their entire empire is built on being a trusted source of information. An AI that confidently makes stuff up? That's an existential threat to their core business. They had way too much to lose.
OpenAI, meanwhile, had a different light bulb moment. They looked at the Transformer and saw something more than just a better language tool. They made a massive bet on a single, powerful idea: scale. What if we just make it bigger? And boy, did they move fast. They took Google's blueprint, the Transformer, and they just kept hitting the enlarge button, bigger and bigger and bigger. From GPT-1 in 2018 to GPT-3 in 2020, they were just relentlessly pushing the envelope.
And when I say bigger, the scale is just mind-boggling. You can think of a parameter as kind of a connection in the AI's brain. GPT-1 had 117 million of them. GPT-3 had 175 billion. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a completely different beast. And all this time, Google was basically watching from the sidelines. So while Google was carefully perfecting its models behind closed doors, OpenAI was getting ready to do something radical. They were about to let their powerful, but definitely imperfect creation out into the wild.
And then came the day that changed everything. November 30th, 2022. The quiet race between labs suddenly became a global phenomenon. ChatGPT was released, and overnight, everyone's understanding of what AI could do just shifted. The growth was just unreal. Nothing like it. It hit 1 million users in 5 days. 5 days. To put that in perspective for you, it took a giant like Netflix 3.5 years to get to that same number.
And the acceleration was insane. 100 million users in 2 months. It became, officially, the fastest-growing consumer app in history. The shockwave was felt everywhere, but nowhere more than inside Google.
Internally, a code red was declared. This is Google's version of a 5-alarm fire, all hands on deck. It was such a big deal they even brought back the founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, for emergency strategy meetings. The sleeping giant had been woken up, and it was panicking.
And what happens when a cautious giant starts to panic? It rushes. And after all those years of careful planning to avoid any damage to its reputation, Google was about to make a very public and very, very expensive mistake.
Not even 3 months after ChatGPT dropped, Google scrambled to announce its answer, a chatbot named Bard. They quickly put out a demo video to show the world, hey, we're still in the game. But the rush job backfired spectacularly.
In their promo, Bard was asked what it could tell a kid about the James Webb Space Telescope. It confidently replied with this factoid. There was just one tiny problem. It was completely, totally wrong.
Yep, the first actual picture of an exoplanet was taken way back in 2004. The irony was just brutal. The company that built the world's greatest fact-checking machine had just launched an AI that couldn't pass a simple Google search.
The market's reaction was swift and unforgiving. As soon as the error went viral, Alphabet's stock absolutely plummeted. They lost $100 billion of market value in a single day.
By the end of the second day, the total damage was over $160 billion. All the reputational risk Google had spent years trying to avoid had just happened in 48 hours. All because they were forced to rush.
Now look, Google has since course-corrected in a big way. Bard has become Gemini, and make no mistake, they are fully in this race now. But this entire saga is just a perfect lesson about strategy, risk, and the danger of inventing the future but being too afraid to release it.
Which really leaves us with this one final massive question. Google was first with the invention. OpenAI was fearless with the application. And while this story is still being written, it really makes you wonder, in the race to build the future, what actually matters more?